Okay, so we're going to talk about drum set ergonomics, and I want to preface it with this. Whatever I tell you is a general thing that I follow, and probably a lot of other drummers follow this too, and there are definitely some drummers that don't, okay? So however you want to set up your drum set is really completely up to you, but here are some of the things that I think about when I set up a drum set that I am playing. So the first thing I always do is I figure out where my bass drum's going to be, and I put my bass drum there. And then what I like to do is set my seat up so that my leg is in this position. And now what I'm looking for when I do this is I don't like my foot being back here, and at the same time I don't like my foot being way up here. Somewhere about this angle and about this height is where I like to have it. So that's where I want the bass drum. Now what's connected to this whole idea here is how high my seat is, not just how far away it is, but how high it is. So if I'm sitting low, it's going to put my leg more in a position like this, which some people feel comfortable playing that way. I don't. I like playing with a little bit more of a downward angle because I feel like I'm more in control and more on top of and in power of the drum set that I'm playing. So now that I have my seat where I want it and I have my foot pedal where I want it, you know, and of course it's easier to move the seat than it is to move the bass drum. So wherever you're setting up your bass drum, you put it there and then set up your seat wherever you're comfortable. And then the next thing that I do is I put my hi-hat stand in the same position but just on my left side. So thinking about all the same things, the angle of my leg, how far I want my foot to be away from my seat or away from me, and the type of angle that I want getting into the hi-hat here. So these are the first two things that I do. After I do that, then I worry about where my snare drum's going. Now on this particular drum set, it might throw you off watching this video, but you can see that this drum set's a little weird compared to your conventional drum set. Usually you have a snare drum stand holding up the snare drum. But my thought process is not any different. I like to have my snare drum about in this position, so the only thing that would change is that it would be on a stand, so I would just move the stand forward or backward based on what I feel like I need to be comfortable. Now, something to think about with the snare drum is I like to bend my arms or drop my arms to my side and bend at the elbow and keep my arm relaxed right here, and wherever I bend up to, wherever those stick tips land, that's where I like to have the center of my snare drum. So 1, 2, 3. Now once I have this little triangle here set up, then I start thinking about all the other instruments I'm putting on my kit. The next thing I'll do is my floor tom. So take my right hand and just turn it to the right, and I want to be able to aim for approximately the center of that floor tom. So I put my floor tom in that position. Now as far as height goes, remember what I was talking about, dropping my arms to my side and bending at the elbow. This gives me good height to be able to play the drum. I don't want to be too much at a over the top angle, but at the same time you don't want to be sitting so low that the snare drum, you have to do this with your wrist to play that snare drum. So when I go to the floor tom, I notice the way that I play is my arm naturally wants to drop a little bit, just as a natural just rotation thing. So my floor tom will typically be a little lower than my snare drum, but also I like to angle it towards me a little bit. So now I can comfortably play all that stuff. Now on this particular drum set, the next thing that I do is I added a side snare to this particular setup. So the way that I think about my side snare is similar to this, but usually when I'm playing a snare drum, I like to be, I guess, rather close to it so I can do rolls and things like that comfortably. I can't do rolls and stuff really comfortably here, but I'm also not playing this a whole lot, so I don't really mind it so much. Usually when I'm playing the floor tom, I'm usually playing single notes. So I'm not too concerned about having to reach a little bit with my left hand. But when I go over to this direction, all I have to do is rotate to get here, and then my right hand, all it has to do is rotate to get there, and I have it set up a little bit higher so I can do my rolls and the things that I want to do. Alright, so we talked about the hi-hat. So the only thing we have to decide on the hi-hat is how high do we want the cymbals to be. For me, this is about perfect. When I play, I like to be able to play with the tip of my stick on top of the hi-hat cymbals comfortably. So that's a good position for me to do it in. If it was much higher than that, then my stick would be at kind of this angle, and I would get a lot of shafting on the stick, or shafting on the cymbal. And not that that's a bad thing, but that's not how I play all the time. Most of the time I play on top. But it's also in the position where if I want to hit the shaft of the stick on the cymbal, all I have to do is just bend down a little bit and I got it. But it's also in a position where I have clearance, because I put the snare drum to the left a little bit, where I can use both hands. And when we're talking about ergonomics, I think that kind of what we're really talking about is how do you set your stuff up so that you're really comfortable. You're not putting any stress on your body whatsoever. So I'm not having to reach for anything at this point. I'm not having to pull back for anything at this point. So all this stuff, I can just flow through it all and feel really comfortable. Now this little hi-hat thingy that I have here, I don't ever really play it. I just like to keep it out of the way. The reason why I have this here is so that when I'm doing the chicks with my left foot, I get a little bit extra sound with the hi-hat jingles there. So this just adds a little bit of texture to what I'm doing. So I don't really ever usually play it, but I can. All right. Then the next thing that I go to is my small tom. Now, one of the things I keep into consideration is when I'm setting up my small tom on this particular drum set is I do like to have my ride cymbal really close to me. I don't want it on top of this, but I want it really close. I almost kind of treat it like it's another tom-tom the way that I have it set up. I just want to be able to get to it easily and not have to spend a lot of time reaching. So for my snare drum, my floor tom, all I have to do is just reach just a little bit to get here to the ride cymbal. Now this is a fairly large cymbal, so I can only get so close. I have to reach a little bit for the bell, but that's okay because I don't play the bell all that much. Okay, so I have the right cymbal where I want it, and then this tom is small enough that I can kind of sneak it in here. So I do have to reach for that, but I don't have to reach very much to get to it. So everything here is comfortable for me. I'm not stressing about it. If I'm reaching for something and I'm having to constantly do that, you're going to get sore here a lot. And there's a part of drumming where if you don't drum a whole lot, you're going to get sore there anyway until you build up that endurance and strength. But talking about this, it's all about taking away unnecessary stress and unnecessary pain, because drumming is a physical instrument, so you want to make it as comfortable as possible for you to be able to play everything you want to play and not have to worry about the physical fatigue of playing all this stuff. All right, so now I have all this stuff where I want it. Now in terms of height, I kind of think about this the same way I think about this. If you look at this, it's high enough that it's out of the way of the lower instruments, but it's not too high where I'm hitting like the shaft of the stick on there. I can reach this tom comfortably, and you'll see that it's angled to me. And the ride cymbal's the same way. I have a slight angle on it so I can get to it easier, but it's still higher than these other instruments. All right, so then let's talk about crashes. My primary crash is this one. So you'll notice it's definitely higher than everything else because it's out of the way. It's close enough to me, and it's short enough still where I can hit it and be comfortable. So I can hit it with either hand and be comfortable. And I'm not even really having to reach that much. It's just more of an angle thing. Okay, and then my secondary crash I keep over here these days. This is a crash I use mostly to ride on. So the way that I'm thinking about this in some ways is similar to the ride cymbal. So I can ride on it and be comfortable because I'm not really having to reach for it. All I'm doing is rotating my arm. That's all I'm doing. And so it's, you know, it's nice because when I'm doing that just a single crash too, it's in the same position. So I don't have to reach or anything. And then the last thing that I have on this particular drum set is the splash cymbal. Splash cymbals I use, well, this one's a larger splash cymbal, so I kind of use it like it's a crash sometimes. But then sometimes I do use it as a part of a fill. But either way, I can get to it without having to reach very much. It's more of a rotating thing. So, how do you apply everything I just talked about to your typical 5-piece setup, which is going to be a snare, 2 toms here, and a floor tom? Well, it's really not all that much different. Everything that I just talked about, I do it the same way on a 5-piece drum set. The only changes that there might be is instead of the ride cymbal being here, it would be your second tom-tom. But also typically on a 5-piece setup, these 2 toms would be pivoted more this direction. That allows me to get the ride cymbal in the general facility of where I wanted it, ultimately, regardless of the type of kit I'm playing. So if I'm playing a drum set that has maybe more toms than that, and I do have some drum sets that have 7 toms on them, I kind of think the same thing. I will start with the small tom here and try to get all the rack toms to be as close together and comfortable going this direction as I can. And then typically the floor toms, I use 2 or 3 of them, will be in this area. And it's all based off of that rotation. So even when I get to that last floor tom, I'm all just rotating on it. And so that puts the ride cymbal usually kind of in this area, but that's not that big of a deal because I'm still just rotating to it. So if I'm adding other cymbals to my setup in different positions, I think about all the same stuff. I want everything to be within a rotation. I don't want to have to reach for things when I go to play it. The more you have to reach, that's the more work you have to do, and you're going to get tired, and you're going to get sore, and you're going to get cramped up.
Would you do that rotation thing one more time?
Yeah, so to rotate, if I'm taking like both my hands, you know, it's everything within this motion is kind of where I want all my instruments. Okay. And then when I'm doing my crashes, all I'm doing is I'm kind of lifting up here and just all of them will be in this area.
Okay.
Same thing going to the left. If you're building your kit to the left, I follow the same principle. I don't typically put too much stuff to my left because the bigger my drum set is, the more enclosed I am. So this becomes my doorway to come in and out of my drum set, which is kind of funny to think about. So I don't usually put too much to my left, but sometimes I will add extra snares. But when I add extra snare drums, I'm thinking about the same kind of stuff that I'm thinking about when I go to the right side. The biggest difference between my right side and my left side is with my snare drums, I do typically have them a little higher and a little closer because I like to play a lot of rudiment stuff on there, and I just feel like I'm more in control that way. With the drums on the right, they typically are a little bit lower because I'm more just hitting the crap out of them. So I think that's all the general stuff, and we'll stop it with that. So any questions?
What's your website?
The one other thing I wanted to add that I forgot to talk about, actually there's going to be 2 things. We'll talk about the second thing first. The second thing is, if you look at all of my stands, the way I like to have them set up is I like to have one leg towards me, and if it's a tripod like this, the other 2 legs away from me. So you'll see that on this stand, you'll see it on this stand, and you'll see it on this stand over here on this particular setup. The reason why I do that, and actually I don't have a snare drum stand, but if I had a snare drum stand, I'd do the same thing. I'd have one leg towards me, 2 legs away from me. The reason why I do that is I like to have room for my feet to feel comfortable. Because if I'm sitting down waiting in between songs, or resting somewhere in there, or whatever it is, I just don't like a lot of clutter down by my feet. I like to be able to just relax. So one leg here and there is not a big deal for me, but if I had 2 legs facing me, then I'd have a clutter of all these legs up underneath me, and then I feel claustrophobic and I'm just not comfortable. So maybe that's more of a mental thing than a physical thing, but that's something that's important to me when I set up my drum set. And then the other thing I was going to mention is with my seat. The way that I like to play to be comfortable is I like to be able to swivel on my seat. So most seats will allow you to do this. Once you set your height and everything, most seats will allow you to loosen up the top portion where the seat actually is off the post so that you can rotate it without it impacting anything else with the stand. So I like doing that because when I move around, if I'm going out to the right, my body might pivot a little bit to the right, And I don't want to feel like the seat's holding me back from being able to freely do that. I know it's a little nitpicky thing, but it really makes a big difference in my playing. I feel like if the seat's holding me down, I feel like I'm strapped in like with a seatbelt, and it makes it just less comfortable to go around. And then also if I'm moving around and I'm just playing, I move around a little bit when I play. Even if I'm not really going in circles or anything, I move around when I play, so I like the seat to be free with me to move. That's important to me. Try it, you might like it. If you don't like it, that's fine, that's all opinion.
Okay. With the legs facing your feet, do you find that your feet move and sometimes even get snagged or trip on the stand?
Not with anything over here, but if you have a setup where you have a bunch of stands where some of the legs come out closer to your foot pedal, that is something that I've experienced before. On this particular setup, it's so light and stand free that I don't really have that issue. But on a bigger, more complicated setup, sometimes you will have stands and stuff here, and if your feet have a tendency to move around a little bit for whatever reason, let's say you're doing certain techniques like this, where you're doing like a heel toe thing, well, I have to turn my foot to the side a little bit to get that, because this pedal's rather small. But you can see now I'm taking up more area with my foot, and that stands almost in my way, but it's far enough that it's not an issue for me right now. So it can happen, is all I'm saying with that. This came up as a question, so I'm going to go ahead and add this to this video. Something that is really common is when you have the hi-hat here and your snare drum here, is how do you not get hung up on your sticks when you're doing different things. There's two things I think about. One is, I actually like to, if I can, see like my foot part's kind of more important to me, you know, how the spacing of my foot from my seat, so I'm comfortable there. But the other thing I kind of think about sometimes when I'm setting this up, because you do have some leeway, is I like to try to get the hi-hat cymbals forward more, and then I like to try to get the snare drum pulled back more. Now, so if you can picture this, some people have the hi-hat right up on them, so that means your right hand's going to be here, and then your left hand's going to be here. Now, this position isn't so bad because you get a little bit less clicking, but to me I feel like I'm all tied up when I'm like that. So by putting the hi-hat forward and pulling the snare drum back, now I'm free. Which leads me to the second thing I was going to mention is, in terms of hi-hat and snare drum technique, most people would probably jump on this and play this way, and I do that a lot, but if I'm doing some stuff where I need to do a lot of right-left work like this, I'll intentionally push my right hand forward and pull my left hand back a little bit. That way it's free. So that's something you can do, is push the right hand forward, pull the left hand back.
Okay.